Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're back with another SEC team preview here. We've got the Tennessee Volunteers up next. Before we do dive in, if you have been enjoying our off-season content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate everyone's support. But the outlook for Tennessee this year, Torvik has them second in the SEC, only behind the defending national champs, Florida Gators. Should be another strong season for Tennessee. But looking at the offensive side of the ball first here, Cody, what strengths do you see in Tennessee's offense?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're bringing in a little bit of star power as opposed from, wouldn't say this team didn't have star power in the past years. It was stars that did different things and were a little bit more defensive minded. But now you're going to bring in a couple guys and Jacoby Gillespie from Maryland and obviously the 5-star Nate Ament that, I think give this team the upside to go deep in March. I think it gives this team on-ball star potential is like something that I would say they've been lacking at least these last couple of years in the last few tournaments. I know they had Dalton Connect a couple of years ago, but that offense actually wasn't fantastic by any means. I think it was in the 30s in adjusted offense in the country. Last year's offense was actually better. I think they finished like inside the top 20. It wasn't a crazy good offense, but they actually they finished with a better offensive rating than they did 2 years ago with Connect. But yeah, I think Jacoby Gillespie at the point guard position kind of changes the dynamic of what Tennessee's offense is going to look like a little bit. Like I mentioned, Ziegler was a star in his own right, but he just did different things. He was, not as creative on the ball as a guy like Gillespie is going to be. I would just say check out the full preview or the full transfer portal review on Gillespie if you want the full breakdown on him. But he was awesome for Maryland last season, and he gives Tennessee just the guard pop that they've been missing. He's a great shooter off the catch and off the bounce. He's a solid passer. He's a much better pick and roll operator than this program has had the past couple seasons. I wouldn't call him a crazy advantage creator, but I think he's a great fit in this offense as well. He was going to play more of an off-ball role too. And the fact that he could just bring that on-ball pop is going to be very important. Then with Nate Ament, he can do the same thing. He's a high-level contested shot maker, super high release to go along with his 6'10" frame. He even looks a little bit bigger, at least with the high school competition that he was playing. But he basically plays like a 7-footer that has a perimeter game as well. He has some rim scoring concerns from what I've seen. He just really struggles to fight through contact, but overall, his shot making ability is going to give this Tennessee offense a little bit more upside. And he's a guy that can play off the ball and make some catch and shoot threes as well. But yeah, like I've mentioned, having the star power is just going to raise the ceiling for the Volunteers this year. And the side of the ball is it's been what's limited them from being able to go deep, being able to finally make that Final Four. I know they were close last season, but they made it to the Elite Eight, and Houston took care of them because Tennessee just didn't have enough offensive punch or a guy that could operate and pick and roll at a high level. They kind of got diced in that area. But one other thing that they're going to do pretty well is get on the offensive glass. They have 3 great offensive rebounding options in Felix Okpara, Cade Phillips, and the Vandy transfer in Jalen Carey that can also provide some scoring pop. Carey is going to be a little bit more offensive minded. And I think the best part is you can play Okpara, Phillips, and Nate Ament together because there are reports out there that Nate Ament's strictly going to play the 3. So it's going to give you a lot of offensive rebounding upside there. I wouldn't be surprised if they were a top 20 to 25 unit in this area.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the offensive glass, of course, is going to be a big strength, especially if Ament is playing a bunch of 3 minutes. They've been in the top, 75 pretty much the whole time that Rick Barnes has been at Tennessee, at least in the top 100 the last 3, 4, or 5 years in the top 75 on the offensive glass. And I think only adding Jalen Carey just makes them better in that area to go along with, as you mentioned, Okpara and Cade Phillips, and then Ament, his upside there. And then you mentioned the star power. I think, like we talked about in our transfer portal review, we really showered Jacoby Gillespie would love. I think he's going to be awesome in his role here on the ball as a shot maker. Shot at 41% last year, 38% for his career between Maryland and Belmont. So he's going to be fantastic. In terms of weaknesses on this team, I have question marks around the off-ball shooting on this offense. Right, they're going to play like a bigger lineup a lot of the time with Ament at the 3. You're looking at a guy like Amari Abram who probably figures to slide in alongside Gillespie. He shot it well last year. He's a solid career shooter at 35.8%. In his time at Mississippi State as a freshman, shot it well, then struggled at Georgia Tech in only 10 games. And last year was back to shooting it well again. So I think they can rely on him there, but I think like the guard depth behind that in terms of off-ball shooting is pretty suspect. I mean, I think a guy like a freshman in Amari Evans can maybe provide something there. But I also think he might be another guy that primarily likes to get to the rim more than shoot it from the perimeter. You've got a sophomore in like Bishop Boswell who played in 28 games last year, didn't make a 3, obviously didn't take a lot of shots, but I just think the overall guard depth behind Gillespie and then like Abram is a little bit lacking. With not really any floor spacers in the front court, right? Like Akpar's career 2 for 12 from 3. Cade Phillips is 0 for 1 for his career from 3. Jalen Carey has shot it a little bit, but not well. 15 for 58 for his career. So I just have worries about the overall off-ball shooting of this team. Granted, like we said, they're going to be really good on the offensive glass, and Gillespie can really shoot it. Ament can shoot it, right? And Abram, it seems like he should be a nice shooting piece here, but overall, the shooting on this roster is not deep. And then, the other thing I had some question marks around, and this is more just sort of projection because of that lack of guard depth. Like, are they going to struggle with handling pressure? Are they going to turn the ball over a bit more than we're used to? Because last year they were 108th. So it's not like they were fantastic taking care of the basketball. Obviously, Gillespie's awesome on the ball. He's always taking care of the ball very well. 15% turnover rate last year for his career, 16.8%. So that shouldn't be an issue, but I think the lack of guard depth raises some red flags for me in that area, especially where like Ament's probably going to be relied on quite a bit as like a secondary creator, and he is a freshman, right? He's coming into the SEC. I think there's always like turnover concerns with freshmen, especially early on, and what's going to be probably the best conference top to bottom in the country. So I think that's just an area of concern that I project a little bit on this team, just with the lack of guard depth.
Yeah, no, they're very fair concerns. I mean, there are question marks about pretty much every other guy in the supporting cast when it comes to the offensive side, and if they're going to be able to make shots at a high level. Like Amari Abram projects to be the guy, but we have seen him at the power conference level before and not have a ton of success. Honestly, he's been fine, and he was had his best shooting year last year at Louisiana Tech, but I'm not super high on him as a creator or like that second ball handler to put next to Jacoby Gillespie. I guess the good part is like Gillespie and Ament are both able to play off the ball while also being able to provide like some initiation for this offense. Like obviously there are concerns with Ament, dealing with size, dealing with physicality, and kind of struggles to get to the rim and struggles to finish when he gets there, like I mentioned. And so I do think Gillespie is going to be the guy that has the ball in his hands a little bit more often. But yeah, it's very fair that these off-ball options aren't spectacular. And yeah, I think it's a team that's going to have to get on the glass quite often. And there are more pieces on this roster that can do so. Like, I guess a guy to monitor would be Dwayne Brown. He's more of he's an offensive rebounding minded guy. Like he's a really wide frame guy that can provide value in that area. It's just like, it's a pretty deep front court, if you bring him into the mix. So, and that's not really something that they need to address. It's definitely more of a perimeter concern, like just after Gillespie and Amen. It doesn't seem pretty right now unless somebody steps up.
No, definitely not. Now shifting to the defensive side of the ball here, obviously a team that has been really good on the defensive end for quite some time under Rick Barnes, projects well to be really good on this end of the floor. Yet again, I think Torvik has them in the top 5 preseason for adjusted defensive efficiency. What strengths do you see for this defense?
Yeah, and if they finish in the top 5 again, it'll be 6 straight years to where they finish in the top 5 nationally, which is like, I mean, at this point, you can't really go against it. And this is a really good roster, especially up front. The rim protection is awesome on this roster, and especially if they're going to play Ament at the 3 and be able to play Phillips and Akpara at the 4 and the 5. It's going to create 3+ rim protectors at all times. Like, I don't know exactly what Ament's going to bring to the table as a rim protector, but you have to assume like the weak side rim protection's there from him. Like the long strides, like just, I don't know, his wingspan's not like amazing by any means, but the length that he's going to bring at the 3 is going to be able to provide value there. And this is Felix Akpara's best trait as a player as a whole, like 8.3% block rate last year. Cade Phillips is like a ridiculous weak side rim protector at a 7.3% block rate. He kind of just shows up out of nowhere and can block anything. Really good in transition as a defender as well. There's just a lot of athletes there, and I jotted down. I wouldn't be surprised if Ament finished with like a 6% block rate. Obviously, it's going to be harder for him to do that when Phillips and Akpara are blocking the shots before he does. But ultimately, yeah, this isn't really a question as to if they can protect the rim or not. Ament's probably going to slide up to the 4 at times just to kind of optimize a little bit more offense, and I think he'll be able to hold his own there. Just a question as to like how much physicality he can deal with down low. But ultimately, it's not going to be a bad defense when he plays the 4. And this is also a good perimeter group, even though they lost 2 of the best defenders in the country in Sakai Ziegler and Jemai Meshack. This is still a pretty good defense, and it starts with Jacoby Gillespie on this end as well. He possesses a lot of the same qualities that Ziegler did in his time at Tennessee. Probably not as great, but he's still, I mean, for my money, like a top 10 to 15 point guard defender in the entire country. The playmaking is there with him, 3.6% career steal rate. He's proven that he can do it in multiple systems. So that's something that I always kind of look at when projecting what a defender can do. And Amari Abrams, he's definitely a downgrade from Meshack. Like that's I think anybody in the country would have been a downgrade, but you can consider it a significant downgrade here. But I think he fits the mold as like a physical 2 guard that has length, and even if he doesn't pan out, they still have some other defenders down the board, and a guy like Boswell who was here last season, and then Amari Evans. He's a like 6'5" wider frame guard with a solid wingspan to go with it, and he's just a good athlete in general. So I think he's going to be able to fit right in. So, I mean, I'm really not concerned with this defense at all. I think there's like true upside for this defense to finish as the number 1 in the country. I think Tennessee is kind of always in the conversation for that every single year, and I think like the rim protection talent is as good as I've seen in the entire country.
Yeah. When I was looking at weaknesses, trying to find weaknesses in this defense, like there wasn't a lot, because I think this defense just has such a high floor with its rim protection. Granted, like last year, an area they did struggle a little bit was on the defensive glass, 211th on the defensive glass in terms of defensive rebound rate. But, you're playing in the SEC that is, hyper focused on offensive rebounding, at least with some of the teams. And I think this is an area they actually got better this year as well, with like an addition like Jalen Carey, who, while he doesn't provide a ton of rim protection upside, career 3% block rate, he is a career 21% defensive rebound rate guy. I think Nate Amen, adding his positional size, playing some 3, while he is a thinner frame guy, I think can chip in on the glass as well. So I think this is an area they're definitely going to see improvement. But in terms of weaknesses, I guess like my main concern is the guard depth again. Like, I know we still like the perimeter group. I think like Gillespie and Abram can really like make plays on this end, control the basketball. But I think just like if I had to pick something, and this is again just kind of a nitpicking smaller concern, because like you mentioned, Boswell I think can be impactful here. I do think the overall like guard depth, or at least proven guard depth on this end, is in question. I think there's some versatility question marks. Like switchability things. Like I do think Akpara and Phillips move well, but you don't really have like this defense doesn't exactly have the same type of like Swiss Army knives that they had a year ago in a guy like Jemai Meshack, that could really guard, seemingly every position despite being like 6'4", right? He's just a really solid defender for this team for what felt like 10 years. And I don't know as if they truly have that type. And obviously they had Sakai Ziegler, who is the best guard defender, one of the best guard defenders in the country. So, again, I think it's just kind of nitpicking because like you said, like this defense could finish best in the country very well, because I think the front court's so good and the rim protection's so elite. So not really any major concerns on this end, but just a couple of things I thought I'd point out.
Yeah, I had similar things pointed out. Like, even though Tennessee teams haven't been great on the glass, like, they finished 211th on the defensive glass last year. They were still the third best defense in the country. They were outside the top 100 in 2023, and they were the best defense in the country. So, I mean, they just deter shots at such a high level. Like, his effective field goal percentage defenses are always inside of the top 50 nationally. When you're doing that in the SEC, it's, it makes you amongst the best defenses in the entire country. So, yeah, I had the depth thing pointed out. I kind of had it. I mean, there were just a couple guys that don't really fit defensively, like a Carey or Dwayne Brown. Like, I think Brown can fit in a little bit with his physicality, and I think he's a slightly better rim protector than Carey. But it's just when those guys are coming off the bench, I think they're coming in a little bit more for offense than anything. But besides that, I don't really have any issues with this defense.
Yeah, that's fair. Jalen Carey, not a fantastic defender, doesn't fit, but I think he can help on the defensive glass a little bit. But
yeah,
now shifting to team MVP and X Factor, who'd you go with here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really between two guys, and for MVP, I ended up going with Jacoby Gillespie. He has the higher floor of the two. He's going to have the ball in his hands more often. I think he's going to be important in pretty much every sense of this offense, handling the basketball, operating in pick and roll, as a shooter coming off screens as well when a man has the ball in his hands, because, Rick Barnes still loves to run his off-ball motion, and, it might be somewhat of an outdated offense, but overall, if you do have guys that can do that at a high level, guys like Chaz Lanier and Dalton Connect, we're perfect for this offense. And, I think Jacoby Gillespie is one of those guys that can fit in that regard. I think Ament is really another guy, but ultimately Gillespie is going to do too many things too well on both ends to not make him the MVP. But I did go with the other candidate as my X factor. Seemed pretty obvious for me. It's more about the offensive end. Like, there's not really a defender that I could have thrown on here to like really change the dynamic in either direction. Like, this is going to be an awesome defense regardless, but Ament's creation and his 3-level scoring ability is going to be the real X factor for Tennessee's offense next year. It feels pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, I went with the same two guys in the same two spots. It was, again, pretty obvious. I think to your point about Ament, I think his ability to be kind of a secondary creator to help Gillespie out is really what's going to stand out. Because as we mentioned, there are like guard depth concerns at the offensive end, particularly from a creation standpoint. And so I think Ament being that secondary creator can really help to elevate this offense for Tennessee. So that brings me to ceiling and floor for Tennessee. Bold prediction before we wrap things up. What'd you go with here?
Yeah, my ceiling is, this team can win an SEC championship. Tennessee they're always in the running for this, and their defense always pretty much automatically has them in the top 5 in this league. And I think they can be a 1 or 2 seed if they win the SEC. And I jotted down Final Four with a question mark next to it. I kind of do this every year, but I actually think, this team has multiple on-ball stars that they can go to as opposed to one. Like I was all in on the Dalton Connect train when like mid-season, and I really thought they had a chance to go to the Final Four that season as well. They ran into Purdue obviously, so it was a little bit tougher. But I do think these two guys can truly take them to a Final Four if the off-ball options are at least competent. But I had their floor at fifth in the league. I just don't really if the offense like really stumbles and there's really like no supporting cast to speak of at all. Like, Phillips and Akbar aren't going to bring a ton to the table from a creation standpoint. They're more play finishers, and one of those other guards is going to really have to step up, like Abram, Evans, or Boswell. And if they can't really provide anything, I can see this offense like slipping outside of the top 40 to 45, which I think would kind of cap their ceiling to tournament to the Sweet 16. I would say, or cap their ceiling to the Sweet 16. I still think they're going to win a game in the tournament regardless, just because their defense is so good. But yeah, it could look like same old Tennessee for the lack of a better term.
Yeah, my ceiling, I went they could win the SEC, and I also said and Final Four maybe. Like hopefully, I do think they can get there, like you said. But at their floor, I said fourth in the SEC. I think the defense is just too good to really fail them in this league. And I think, that could come with a first weekend exit. I do think, like you said, they should win a game at least. But, at their floor, I think they could maybe end up in that like 4 or 5 seed game, like the 4 or 5, and lose in the second round to whoever they run to. But I think this team has a lot of upside. So bold prediction, I went with Jacoby Gillespie's stat. I think he can average 18 and 6 on this team. I think he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. Last year, I forget what he actually averaged for assists.
It's like 4.8.
Yeah, so a bit of a jump, of course, but I think there's less guys to play through here at Tennessee compared to what they had at Maryland. I think you're going to see a big increase in his usage rate, and I think he's going to have the ability to really blow up this year in the SEC from a scoring perspective and take that jump to around 18 or so.
Yeah, I would agree. I went a similar route for my bold prediction. I went with an award for him, actually. I think he's the SEC Player of the Year. I think there's too much on his plate from an offensive perspective. And, if this is a top 3 team in the SEC and I think he can easily meet that stat line. 6 assists is going to be tough, but I definitely think 18 points per game is in the realm of possibility. Kind of depends on how Nate Ament's coming along as a creator, but I do think Gillespie's in store for a massive year. Obviously, we're both pretty high on him. But so yeah, I think he's the conference player of the year, and I think if Tennessee is like a top 5 team in the country at season's end, I think he's in the conversation to win national player of the year.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think he's a lot of fun. We saw what he could be at Maryland last year. Now he's got a bigger role. I think it's definitely reasonable to think he could win those awards. So anyway, we'll wrap things up here with Tennessee, and we'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.